Well, Mitch, thank you so much for joining me today on the highest level. Really excited to talk about some basketball and specifically some NBA playoff basketball with you here, pertaining to your career as well. But before we get into the NBA talk, let's talk about being an All-American in college, a privilege that you had playing at Nazareth College. So I just want to hear just your development from a freshman to eventually becoming an All-American your senior year at Nazareth College.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to take it a step back, actually. I'm going to bring it back to high school a little bit. And, in high school, but in high school, I was a kid. I mean, I played a lot of basketball. I had the opportunity to play on some really good travel teams and be exposed to some of the best players around the country. And being a part of a very good football program that was very disciplined and a basketball program that wasn't necessarily seen as one of the better ones around, just to be quite frank. And I was given the opportunity to have a lot of responsibility when I was in high school. I was given the opportunity to kind of figure it out and how to be a leader. But I knew that my biggest strength in high school was my physicality and my skill set. So when I went into college, I was kind of a bull in a china shop, to be very honest. And I went in and had some foul troubles in the typical, freshman figure it out type phase. Sophomore year, had a group of great leaders, had the opportunity to play with my brother as well. Actually, he was a senior, and just the best teammates, everything that I've ever been a part of. A really good opportunity to learn from some older guys. And, kind of at the end of my sophomore year, I reflected a little bit and said, okay, these guys are gone. I'm going to be naturally stepping into a leadership position. What do I need to do to take my game to the next level? And skill-wise, I was really confident, and I was going and heading in the right direction. But really what it came down to was me controlling my emotions, me stepping into to be a better leader, and just working on the skills and the empathy and some of the, the soft skills off the court that would allow my game to really flourish. Not talking to refs and not doing things like that can obviously be a detriment. And, after my junior year, I had a little injury problem, but things started to look really well. And then during my senior year, I think I was just very calm and focused, I would say, were the two words. Didn't let too much bother me. I was really focused on the goal to just be the best player that I could be and help our team win as many games as we could. And we started off with, I think it was 4 games that we lost by a total of 6 points to start off the season. And it was a really tough time. And after that, just kind of persistence and hard work to just get through it. And, All-American is a team thing. It's not just an individual accolade. But yeah, I ended up having a great season. And I think it was because I did a really good job of studying and learning how to control my emotions mostly.
Yeah, really interesting perspective. I mean, we watched all these games on TV, and it seems, especially in the NBA now, everybody's almost minoring or maybe majoring in acting to a certain extent. And I love how you had the self-awareness as a younger athlete to kind of say, maybe that doesn't actually serve me if I'm trying to play at my highest level. So very good insight. And I know after your college career, you got an opportunity to work with an NBA team. So just walk us through how that happened. How do you go from kind of playing at a smaller college to actually working with an NBA team so shortly?
Yeah, absolutely. So right after college, like I just touched on, I had some injury problems and I was really burned out from playing. I was thinking about doing the whole overseas thing, and I had some agents reach out to me, and quite frankly, I said, I do not want to be anywhere near basketball for a little while. Well, 3-4 months later, I graduate, all my friends are getting jobs, and I'm still at home just kind of with a part-time job trying to figure it out. And I happened to find a really good website that had all jobs from professional sports teams. And I said, you know what, let's go. Why not just shoot my shot? So I applied to about every single job in the NBA that I think there was, even dating back to jobs that were posted 9 months ago, just because I didn't know any better. I'm a 21, 22-year-old kid. Got a call from the Charlotte Hornets, and it was for a job in the front office. And what I realized was I happen to have a pretty good connection to their head coach. And I don't know if you know this, if you watch some of these NBA games, especially with Jeff Van Gundy, he'll get a shout out saying that he was a Nazareth College basketball player. So I met Jeff a few times, and he happened to connect me over with the Hornets. So was really lucky to get that opportunity and have Jeff on my side for that.
Yeah, that's really cool. And like, what did you guys have an extensive relationship, or was it just something where you kind of maybe felt uncomfortable but wanted to make the ask? Like, just talk to us about actually making that ask from somebody who, for all intents and purposes, is a VIP in our circles.
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, Jeff, I couldn't speak more highly of Jeff. He has been a huge advocate for Division III and Nazareth College in general. And again, I could go down that rabbit hole and talk Jeff Van Gundy all day. But, I had a good career, and he came to campus and he spoke for a few times to, all the captains of some of the different teams at Nazareth. And I just got the chance to have a sit down with him for just a one-on-one for maybe 30, 40 minutes, and just got to ask him anything. And I'm 21 years old. And this is an NBA coach, Hall of Fame basketball coach. And I was probably starstruck. I wish I had that opportunity now, but, just got the chance to get to know him a little bit. And when the time came, I messaged my coach, and he just said, reach out to him. Or like, I'll help you connect. And I just made the ask. It ended up working out in my favor, obviously. But, the one part that just shows, into Jeff's character a little bit. I was probably 4 months into the job, and he flew in to announce one of the games, and he calls my office and he said, hey, man, should come down to the court? We'd love to meet up. And, those things you just never forget. And, that's why I think some of these best coaches, talk about character and some of the intangibles and those soft skills, how important those are. I will forever have that respect for him because he did those types of things when he really didn't have to.
Oh yeah. I mean, you will never be in a position to help Jeff Van Gundy ever. And a lot of coaches understand that and take advantage of that, I think, from younger coaches. And you're right. Definitely did not need to do that for you, but what a cool thing. I had a similar story when I got into the NFL. I called on somebody who I had only met, for 20 minutes about a month before. And I felt really weird doing it. And I was kind of questioning myself, is this right? Should I do this? I really don't have a relationship with this person, but you can't underestimate the impact that you can make on somebody in just a short 20-minute conversation or a 40-minute conversation. I mean, that was essentially kind of like a job interview, right? Had you not impressed him in some form or fashion during that one conversation, he wouldn't have taken your next call. So that's really cool to kind of hear that insight, and kind of inspiring too for anybody that's trying to access the highest levels of their industry. I love that.
Make the ask. Always do. There's no shame in asking for help. That is definitely something else.
Yeah, one of the keys to success in life for sure. So that's really cool because you got the chance to work in the front office for the Charlotte Hornets, but then you made a move into player development. So just kind of talk about that transition into player development, and how did that come about going from the front office?
Yeah, absolutely. So during my time with the Hornets, I was getting a lot of text messages from coaches around the country that I've just networked with saying, hey, I have this assistant job. I have this graduate assistant, kind of a few different opportunities that maybe I'd be interested in just based off of previous conversations and me wanting, kind of having that itch to be back in basketball. So I ended up leaving the Hornets without a job. And I sat in a coffee shop every day for about 3-4 months and just emailed every single coach in the whole country. Just like people said, exactly what you don't do, copy and paste it and send it around. Well, that's exactly what I did for a few months. And, I really wanted to get into college coaching. College coaching was the do all end all. I didn't think the NBA was even possible. I just said, like, how am I going to get a job in the NBA? Like, I was just with the Hornets, but it wasn't on the coaching side of things. So I was messaging, I was traveling across the country. I was living out of my car. I was up at Marquette for a camp, and then I would drive down to Florida for a camp. So I drove 20 hours across the country. I ended up driving back to Chicago, back to New York, where I'm from. And then I applied for a job with the Mavericks, and I happened to have a connection there who had the same player development job that I had. So had the in, and this is my favorite part of my journey. I tell the story to everybody. I was in my car. I will never forget it. I was in the southern part of Indiana. I was driving, and I got a phone call from someone in the front office or someone on the staff at the Mavericks. And they said, we want to interview you. When can you do it? I said, anytime, like literally anytime. Let's do it. I don't care. Like, I'm making it a priority to make this happen. They said, all right, business formal in 2 hours. Let's do it. And I am in the middle of Indiana. I know exactly where my suit is packed. It was the first thing I packed because I was like, why would I ever need this suit for anything for the whole summer? It doesn't make sense. So I ended up pulling into a library in Indiana. No idea, just typed in closest library. Dug out all the stuff out of my car, picked up my suit, went in the little closet in the library. I'm like in a box, like size of nothing. And, happened to have a good interview and ended up with the Mavericks. I had a job effective in August, and I spent a few more months working some camps, and that was really my transition into it. I started training kids when I was in high school, and all through college I've had some parents say, hey, my son loves the way you play, or I love the way you play, can you teach him a few things? And I got exposure young, so that opportunity with the Mavs was exactly what I was looking for.
Yeah, really cool. I love that story. That is that is great. I can just imagine you kind of kind of squished into that closet doing the interview. But I think that says a lot about you, and any young coach can, I think, identify with that. Just kind of like being ready and willing to move or interview at the drop of a hat. So very cool that happened. And then you get a chance to work in player development with the Dallas Mavericks, which I would imagine would be close to, a dream come true in terms of the type of role that you had. You mentioned training guys before, but I would assume that you learned a ton entering into the Mavericks, right? Not only did you bring a lot to the role, but obviously you were kind of stepping up and getting a chance to learn. Who were you learning player development from within the Mavericks? I'm sure there were lots of people, but did anybody stand out to you?
Yeah, I would say watching God Shamgod, especially with his ball handling drills, work with some of these guys. I mean, it speaks for itself. I mean, he's a legend, and his attention to detail and just how well he bonds with the players and the connection that he builds with those players is so great. And then obviously Mike Procopio, who was my boss, he was the director of player development, and his thing is dominate simple, and that's his tagline. And he was a fantastic component of these guys that were 6 through 12 on the Mavs roster, filling in to become more effective role players, especially as you see today, going into this playoffs.
Yeah, that's awesome. And obviously 2 of the top names. I mean, even though I spent my career in football, I know both of those names as kind of 2 top player development guys in all of basketball and in the NBA. So an amazing experience. Like, talk for a second on like what's important when we're talking about player development in the NBA specifically.
I think the first and foremost, definitely building a relationship with the players. If the players do not get along with you, if the players they think you're fake or you have a different motive, that is 100% the biggest thing when it comes to player development in the NBA. And then, I mean, you have to know your stuff. You have to be credible. You have to have the background, and that was something that was tough. Being a guy from a Division III school who they said, "Oh, what college did you play at?" And I say some small college up in New York, they're like, huh, never heard of it. Where, you know, some of these guys were like pro, who he was Kobe Bryant's personal video coach. So he spent the whole season obviously working with Kobe Bryant and breaking down every single game. Like, that is instant credibility. If Kobe Bryant trusts you to do your video work and be your consultant, you can respect what he says, or you can instantly gain that credibility. And, you know, I think overall, like, those guys just did such a good job of treating them as people first, and caring about them and caring about their development and helping them get paid and become great players. So I would say that.
Oh my gosh, I love that. You know, very, very much in line with what I've seen in my football career, and even now the work I do in corporate environments. I mean, I think it's often overlooked, but you're right, it is the most important piece. So let's get into the Mavericks, because like here you are, and you know the audience is probably well aware. I'm from Dallas, and there's no team I love more than the Dallas Mavericks, and have been since 1989, 1990. But you get to come in at a very cool time, because you're coming in. Not only is there like an influx of young talent that we're seeing on display currently in the 2022 playoffs, but you also got a chance to work with Dirk Nowitzki, the all-time greatest Maverick, one of the all-time NBA greats. So let's just start off there. We're talking about Dirk, and I would love to hear, it's the last year of his career. So what was his mentality like? And was he carrying on the same rituals as he did early on in his career, or was he kind of in a different phase because of his age?
Yeah, I mean, he was doing the same rituals. I mean, his shooting coach, or his player development guy, Holger, would fly in from Germany, and they would do their workouts, and they wouldn't want any other players around. They would just do exactly what he's been doing his whole life growing up, and it seemed like the exact same routine. He was very focused. Anytime he was on the court, he was very focused. You can read as many stories as you want. Like, he is the nicest guy, but once he's on the court, he's dialed in. He's dialed in, absolutely. And, you know, couldn't speak more highly. And seeing that in person, like, that is the biggest learning experience you can get. This is what Dirk does. This is Dirk's shooting routine. And just getting to sit there and witness greatness, like, that is truly greatness in motion. But he was absolutely dialed in all the time, and he was such a great person, and a great person for the organization. Everyone rallied around him. So yeah, I mean, I couldn't speak more highly about Dirk. It was really special to just watch him.
Yeah, and you know, obviously he definitely has this feel, especially in the Dallas Fort Worth area, where it's like he's a beloved figure, almost more so than the Dallas Cowboys, which is really saying a lot here in the Metroplex. And I think a lot of it has to do with his personality and the type of person he is. Were there any stories that you were hearing when you got there? I mean, obviously you'd been there for 20 years before. Were there any stories that people were telling about him, just in terms of maybe that legendary work ethic or the type of person that he was, that stand out to you?
Honestly, you know, what I remember the most is just him himself. I didn't hear too many stories about when I came in and stuff in the past, but one of my favorite, you know, encounters with Dirk was, he was coming back from an injury the season that I was there. He had I think a minor ankle surgery. So he was rehabbing a lot. And we had a group of, you know, interns, video coordinators, some of the entry level guys that would go out and play with these guys to help them rehab, to get their wind up. And, you know, I had the chance to guard Dirk a few times. You know, everyone matches up with, hey, I got this coach, or I got this coach. And I'm looking around, and like, I don't have a matchup. And Dirk walks on the court. He's like, I'll play. And I'm sitting there like, oh my goodness. Like, and this is probably my first week. And I'm sitting there like, I'm so overwhelmed right now. Like, this is crazy. And he went up and obviously made, you know, 17 of his 18 mid-range fadeaways. And I'm sitting there trying as hard as I can. There's just nothing I can do. And sat down after the game and was like, man, like I couldn't do anything. And someone came up to me and said, he was doing that in the NBA finals. Like, you're not going to stop it. Like, there's nothing that can stop it. He was like, who's doing that against LeBron James and Chris Bosh? Like, it's okay. And I was sitting there like, wow, that was really the first taste of ever playing a guy, obviously, that caliber. And he was 41 years old and couldn't move. So
it's still dominating you.
Absolutely, still just demoralizing me.
Well, that's okay. He's done it to basically every NBA great over the last 20 years. You talked about playing with these guys. Tell us like a little bit about what are you doing when you're in player development in the NBA? Are you watching film and trying to pick up tendencies on the other team? Is it mostly on court, like rehab, or on court drills? Just kind of share with us like the day-to-day duties that you would have in a player development role.
Yeah, a lot of what I was doing was on court. So whether it was running scout team, whether it was, executing others' teams' offenses against them, we did our film sessions. We did a lot of some of the analytics side. We tracked every practice shot of all the players for the whole season. They keep their logs of, every type of shot. If they go in, they go out, and how many, shots players have for a season in their individual workouts. So we charted that every single day. So kind of a combination, but really our biggest role was to be the guys to do everything. Like, my job was just to do everything. Like, be the glue, kind of be, behind the scenes, like, don't get in the way, but make sure everything runs as smooth as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. And so cool that you get a chance to kind of work hands-on with these great players. And maybe like talk a little bit about like the actual player development. So like, does player development differ if we're talking about a Dirk Nowitzki and a Luka Doncic versus maybe somebody who is, a sixth man on the roster, or maybe at the bottom half of the roster? Just talk about how player development differs, if any.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mike Procopio was a big proponent, and he made this a point to us. And this is one of the things that stuck with me was, true player development is taking those guys who are, 6 through 9, 7 through 10 on the roster and getting them into those roster spots. That's true player development. And I don't remember the exact stat, but I think it was 90%, or there's only 100 players or something like that that average 10 shots a game. Well, okay, so you have 350 players in the NBA who average less than 10 shots a game. Well, what type of shots are they? Are they step back threes, and are they, these crazy floaters? Like, no, for the most part, if you're taking 7 shots a game, likely they're corner threes, likely they're hook shots or putbacks if you're big, or it's a straight line drive. And that was a big thing. A huge emphasis is, just dominate, simple. Like, that's what he would always say. Dominate at the things that you can control. And Jeff Van Gundy actually had a quote, and he said that shooting percentage is just as much on decision-making as it is technique. And it's like, the better decisions and the more effective you can just do a straight line drive. And even if that's a kick to the corner and you get an assist, or even a hockey assist, that's a winning NBA play. So, yeah.
I like that. It's like, focusing on making winning plays, not so much like scoring or making the incredible shot. I think that's where maybe from the outside, we think that they practice all these other things. But, I know Kobe Bryant in particular, and I think Dirk is the same way. They're legendary for practicing the most basic of drills, the most basic of footwork, even though they are literally at this legendary status. So it really does kind of highlight how, like you said, like those simple things really are the things that lead to success.
Yeah. And that's where the success with the Mavs has been. Shifting to the defensive side of things, they just play their role. And everyone says Luka's an average defender. He's a bad defender, whatever you want to say, but he had 3 steals last game in game 7. And I think he had 2 steals the night before. Like, I'm not saying that he's some defensive stopper, but he knows the rotations. He knows exactly where he has to be to make things happen. He gets deflections. He gets in the way. And again, that's because Maxey and Dwight Powell, and I know Dwight didn't play a lot in that series, but those guys, they play so hard and they just cause havoc that, someone has to make a bad pass. And that is, player development on the other side of things. You can teach someone how to read an angle, but you can't teach someone how to play hard and alter every single shot and make Luka the beneficiary of 3 steals.
Yeah, and it is criminal how underrated he is on defense. I know he's not a great defensive player, but he is not this defensive liability that the media has kind of like created. It's so funny. I sometimes even question like how much people watch film because I watch this team all the time, and I'm like, he's not that bad. Like he does a lot of great things on the defensive end. Maybe let's talk a little bit about Luka for a second, because I know you were there his rookie year. And obviously now he has developed into, I think, you know, in the last couple of weeks, he's kind of solidified himself as a top player in the NBA. But just talk about how he was as a rookie. We all know that he kind of like really came onto the scene very strong, but just talk about what you saw behind the scenes that rookie year.
Yeah. Coming into the NBA, he knew English, but he was a little more, I would say, reserved because, you know, he was just getting used to things. He didn't know the language super well. And he was, you know, hard worker and always happy, you know, all those different things. But, you know, he just turned it on. I mean, he is an absolute gamer. Him and Brunson both, they are just gamers. And they just want to play. The one thing that stood out, and this was Luka's probably first scrimmage, because he came in and I'm pretty sure he was either rehabbing or just kind of easing into things, or he was playing overseas. I can't remember the exact, but it was the first 5v5 live scrimmage for the Mavs. And I remember he's coming up the right side. He got a rebound and takes 2-3 dribbles. He's at half court and throws an overhead right hand bullet pass to the left corner 3. And he hits, it was either Wes Matthews or Harrison Barnes, and it was just straight in the hands. And it was like, that was the best pass I've ever seen in my whole life. And it happened like almost the first possession of this 5-on-5 game. Like that was and everyone in the gym, not everybody, but we were kind of looking at each other like, oof, okay. Like this kid, okay, this might be onto something. And then obviously, you know, the further and further he got into shape and got used to the NBA, you know, he showed his colors and how good he was.
Yeah, this is cool. This reminds me of a story about Andrew Luck, his first practice at Stanford. So he had a great high school career here in Texas, goes to Stanford, and I think he redshirted his first year because they had a senior that was going to start at quarterback. So they redshirted him. In his first practice, he throws like an 18-yard out route from the far hash, which in football quarterback is like the most difficult pass to make because you're on the far side of the field and it needs to be very, very accurate, like almost pinpoint on the sideline, or else it's an easy pass to get picked. And he just made this like bullet throw. And David Shaw told the story where he was like standing next to Jim Harbaugh in the back, like behind the huddle. And they just kind of both looked at each other and they're like, that was literally the best pass we've ever seen from a college quarterback. And it's like period 1, practice 1 of the Andrew Luck era. So
like unbelievable.
Yeah. So sometimes when you hit on that greatness, it's like, it is noticeable from very early on. You mentioned Jalen Brunson. I love this guy. I really hope the Mavs re-sign him. Part of the reason why I absolutely love him is because here he goes to college. He plays at Villanova. Villanova hasn't had really any type of major success in 30 years. Jalen Brunson shows up on the scene along with his teammates and the program that Jay Wright had built. But on Jalen Brunson's back, they win 2 national championships, and Jalen Brunson is the player of the year. And every team in the league overlooks Jalen Brunson. Mm-hmm. And everything that I love about Jalen Brunson, and I do love his game, but I love everything else outside of his game. I love how tough he is. I love how he misses 9 shots and he comes back and he doesn't even flinch taking the 10th shot. I love how he must be near the league leaders in taking charges in the paint, even though he's one of the smallest guys in the league. So just talk about the intangibles that somebody like that brings, because you would think that everybody would say, man, this guy is a 2-time national champion. He's the national player of the year. He has proven it time and time again, but yet everybody seemed to overlook him. So talk about what you noticed from Jalen Brunson early on his rookie year.
Yeah, I mean, he's just a winner. I mean, the straight up bottom line, he is a winner. He makes winning plays. and he has a winning attitude. He has winning work ethic, everything about him. He's just a winner. And, the way he treats people, the way he listens, the way he focuses, everything is just to the next level. And the only reason, in my opinion, that he went 33rd or whatever the pick was, 36, I think it was, it is because he was 22 years old. And the new hot thing is, drafting the players that are 18 or they're 17 and they've been there for half a year and whatever. I mean, there's no explanation why he shouldn't have been a higher pick. And that's when Michael Finley even said, we got our guy. Like, that was our guy that we wanted. We got Brunson. And again, he's just one of those guys that you watch a game and you look at his face and just the intensity and the pure just motivation to just absolutely win at all costs it's next level. And I would say that has something to do with his dad being in the NBA and being a great NBA player, and he knows what it takes, and he was around it at a young age. But at the same time, he's taken that, he's executed it, and he's earned whatever contract that he's going to get from the Mavs.
Yeah. Hopefully, I really hope so. And I think after just this last weekend, winning Game 7 in Phoenix, I think they're definitely going to bring this group back. Let's talk about somebody who doesn't have the pedigree, who doesn't have an NBA dad. Let's talk about Doe Doe Finney Smith, because here's a guy that was undrafted. And even though, Brunson was drafted and quote unquote overlooked, he still did a lot of great things in college. Dorian Finney-Smith didn't have any near the accolades or pedigree, like we said. Talk about him and just kind of the absolute blossoming that has occurred over the last 4 years from when you worked with him as a rookie.
Yeah, and just relentless work ethic for Dorian. Just absolutely relentless. Him and Shamgod especially work together a lot. And he just wanted to be the best that he could be, and he still wants to be the best that he can be. And he is clearly a top tier defender, and there's nothing that explains that more than heart. I mean, he has to have, you have to have heart to be a top NBA defender. You have to want it so bad. And one of the things I remember about him, and I'm not sure if it's still that way, but he had a picture of a pit bull in his locker. And it's like the pit bull mentality, like, kind of, I'm just going to be a dog. Like, I'm going to go out there and just make it happen no matter what. And I don't know if you remember, but back at Florida and Virginia Tech for the year, he played the 4 and the 5. He was not a shooter. I don't even know if he shot 30% in college. So he comes in and now he's hitting 8 threes in a game, and Game 5 against the Suns. And it's just like, man, what a change. And that's true player development. That's a guy who just put the hours in. And again, I mean, I'm obviously really high on this Mavs team. I think they're going to make a run to the finals personally.
So one of the reasons why I'm like talking about Jalen Brunson, I think it's so key to sign him. And I thought it was key to sign Dorian Finney-Smith. When you are talking about a team or a company, but sports in particular, you have to be able to tell stories. Like, you have to be able to point to people and say, this is what we stand for. Dirk Nowitzki walks in the door and you see him work tirelessly, even at the age of 40, 41 years old. And that sends a message to everybody. But I think at the same time, developing younger guys also sends a message, right? Like, this is what we do. If you show up and you do what we tell you, and you have this pit bull mentality, or you have this heart and you bring this every day, this is what can happen. You can become a Jalen Brunson. You can become a Dorian Finney-Smith. Is that talked about in the Mavericks? Because they have a really good history of developing guys that were overlooked or undrafted. They've done this time and time again, really over the last 15 years or so, but in particular with the current team. Is that something that they talked about? Because I see it from the outside, and I think the player development is key in terms of having something to point to that represents your culture.
Yeah, I mean, even going further back, it starts with scouting. It starts with looking at guys who are – the Mavericks have a culture. They have their culture in place. It is a top-tier culture and out of any organization I've been through, starting from Mark Cuban all the way down. And obviously there's been some things here and there, just like every other organization, but they have the standard. They have the type of guys that they want in the gym. They have the guys with the mentality that are hard workers, that are good people, and it speaks for itself. But, couldn't give more props to the scouting department. I mean, a guy from Würzburg, Germany, like Maxi, who's undrafted, unknown, 6'10", obviously there's some type of connection there. And he just happens to be an absolute relentless defender, someone who doesn't care if he gets dunked on, because he's been dunked on more than anybody I've seen. But he'll go up and make twice as many blocks. And he's out there getting switched down to Chris Paul and tipping every single shot that he takes, or every other shot that he takes. He's absolutely paramount, but it's like, who found this guy? And that's what it comes down to, is why didn't another team take a shot on him? Why didn't another team take a shot on Dorian? Why didn't another team draft Brunson at 20? And it's just all of those things, kind of added up. I mean, amazing job by the scouting department. But yeah, the Mavs have their culture in place, and they know the type of guys that they want. And that's why, some of these guys are great picks. Some of them don't work out, but a majority of what they've done lately has worked out.
I love that you said this. Obviously, this is where I shamelessly plug my book, Finding Intangibles, because it all goes back to the people that you bring in. Your people become your culture. Mm-hmm. I also think that the Mavericks, this is why they go get people from overseas and have a lot of success with those people. We don't have to get into like the whole American society now and like the type of NBA stars that come into the league. But I think I've heard Mark Cuban talk about AAU culture versus European culture. Mm-hmm. And there's a big difference between Luka being a pro player at 16 years old, playing against men in the European leagues over there, versus being an AAU star, teaming up with a bunch of other, future NBA players, flying on private jets. Not saying that doesn't happen in Europe, but I think like when you immediately go onto a pro team, and just the European mentality is much like you just described for Maxi Kleber. Like I'm going to give it my all. If I get embarrassed, it literally doesn't matter. I'm coming back the next time down, and I'm going to give the exact same effort, if not more effort, if I possibly can. And I think that is definitely indicative of the success the Mavericks have had. And you can even make the argument like they have vastly outperformed the talent they have, in large part because of the type of players and the intangibles that exist within that culture.
Yeah, absolutely. And, kind of just going off that point, I mean, nobody expected them to go to the Western Conference Finals. People were saying Suns in 4 and all these things, but these guys are so tight in the locker room. They cultivate a chemistry that is just beyond basketball. And yeah, European players and AU culture, we could talk for 3 hours about that. I think the European players, they play such a different game that they have a different view on things. Like, obviously, you can be 6'9" and be dunking on everybody and catching alley-oops and be an Instagram star and be in the AAU culture. That's great. You can go on and have an amazing NBA career. You can go on and be a Hall of Famer for all I care. But, it really comes down to when you're 16 years old playing with 33-year-old men, and they know the game better than you, and they're pushing you around, and they're pushing you to different extremes, and they teach you how to be a pro. That's where the difference is these kids that are 17, 16 years old, they're not being taught how to be a pro. They're taught how to be a high-flying AAU basketball player. And I think that's where just the development early on, that's why guys from Europe come in and are so good right away, typically.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, 100%. And it's almost like they're better prepared. They may not have the ceiling. And look, I'm not arguing that Kyrie Irving or, Kevin Durant isn't like among the most talented players in the league. But I think what we're talking about isn't who's the most talented. It's kind of going back to what you said, who can dominate simple, who can make the winning plays. Like, it's great if you can get on Sports Center, and that's great for ESPN and Disney and like what they're trying to promote. But like, if we're talking about winning, that's not always what wins. Let me ask you, Mitch, who else do you think is doing it really well right now in terms of organizations and teams?
Yeah, ironically, I would say the Phoenix Suns, but I probably wouldn't say that after this series from all the things that I've heard and kind of blow up. Yeah, I think that the Celtics are doing a really great job. I mean, they've kind of gone against the odds. They started off slow this season. They brought in, Marcus Smart and Jalen Brown and Tatum or whatever, but they bring in a guy like Grant Williams, and it's just like, what a great fit. A guy who he's the head of the Players Association. He's a bright guy. He comes in, he plays his ass off, and he goes and has 8 threes in a game 7 and beats the Bucks. I mean, that stuff is just so indicative of the type of person he is, but it's indicative of the type of team the Celtics are to bring in a guy like that. I mean, there's so many doubts of, yeah, he's a 6'7", power forward that can't shoot that well. Well, he's a winner and he brings those intangibles and he does those things. So, the Celtics, I think, are a good one. And there's a lot of examples across the NBA. But, from my experience and watching the Mavs, and even from my year there to watching them now, it's just doubled and tripled and quadrupled down that they just do it right. And they're creating, their culture is so mature that whoever they bring into it and they do buy into it, they end up succeeding.
Yeah. Very cool. And I mean, now we're getting here into the playoffs, and you mentioned something a minute ago I just want to touch on briefly. The bench of the Dallas Mavericks has stood out to me in this playoffs, right? Like, they're always standing up. They're always like very engaged in the game. And you kind of alluded a moment ago that has to do with their culture. So just kind of talk about that a little bit, because I know like during this last Phoenix series, they were kind of like showing clips of the Phoenix bench where they're like sitting on their hands. They're like sitting on the bench. Whereas they look at Dallas and every single player, including Mark Cuban, the owner, is like standing up, screaming, like encouraging their guys on the defensive end. Just talk about what you've noticed from the Dallas bench, or maybe any other teams that have similar benches or camaraderie on their team.
And starting off with, as a coach, you kind of look at the bench, you see different things. And yes, I think the Suns, up until this series, everything seemed like that they were the best organization, or they were going to be in the next 3 finals or whatever. But, you watch their body language, you watch guys quit on their teams. I'm not going to name names, but, and then you watch a guy like Theo Pinson, who absolutely, I mean, heart and soul of that bench. He is up screaming. You watch guys like Tim Hardaway, who he's hurt for the season, but he's being the best teammate. And, not to talk about, Boban and running after Aaron Holiday and whatnot, but Tim Hardaway is the first one out there to grab Boban. And he's like, man, we're good. Like, let's go. Like, just being a good teammate. And obviously Boban himself is notoriously one of the best teammates, in the NBA. So, it starts there, but at the same time, I can't remember exactly who made a 3. It was either Dorian or Spencer Dinwiddie this last game, probably Spencer, because he had 6 of them. But Luka, they cut to Luka on the sideline just screaming. And he's just like, let's go, like whatever he said. And that's where when your leader is doing it from the bench and you're the 14th, 13th guy and you're not doing it, you're not going to last very long on a culture like that.
Yeah. It's really, I mean, I think it's so encouraging for me, especially to see stuff like that. I mean, obviously I believe a lot in intangibles and the effect that they have on the team. And I know a lot of people, even people I've worked with in the past, would look at that and say, well, you can't measure that. Like, what does that really matter? Like, you're talking about Theo Pinson standing up and being the heart and soul of the team, but like that matters, especially and even if it's not like having a direct effect on like what's happening on the field of play. Like, it's representative of the culture. It's representative of what's happening in that locker room. And that's what I think like sometimes we miss on, is we don't focus on like what's happening in the locker room. We just look at strictly like, oh, well, they have Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, like they should destroy this team. And like what you don't realize is a team like the Celtics, like they're battle tested. They have a superstar. Yeah, they're not as talented, but they're a better team. They do the small things that lead to winning. And that's really interesting that you're kind of pointing this out and like it's showing out. The most talented teams in the NBA are not in this Final Four grouping, which is really fascinating.
And something that really sticks out. And obviously, I mentioned the Celtics earlier, but I would debate that the Warriors and the Heat are probably two of the next top 5 for the best cultures. And it just happens to be that those are the Final 4 teams in this NBA playoff. I would say the Bucks are up there as well, but the whole thing with Heat culture and what Spoelstra's done down there is absolutely immaculate. And yeah, they've had some riffs with Jimmy Butler and blah 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 and whatever you want to say. He's just a competitor. Those guys are in check. Udonis Haslem is a vet, and he's not going to take anything from these guys. But look where they are.
Yeah,
they're right in the Eastern Conference Finals, and they are rolling. So the intangibles are everything to me, and that's why I truly believe that's why all 4 of these teams, even if they're the most talented or not, end up being in this place. Like the Celtics earned their spot into the number 1 seed, but they were, maybe 500 to begin the year. Like they just bought in. They just kind of embraced what they're doing, and they're here.
Yes. Yeah. And Dallas is the exact same. Did not have a ton of success early on. They had some weird team COVID issues. And it's just like things just started to come together. And, I've been really studying Jason Kidd a lot because of, the proximity. But I was really fascinated. I was not excited about this hire because of basically the dumpster fires he had left his 2 previous organizations in. And they were asking him the other night about, just his development as a coach. And he spoke very highly of working with Frank Vogel. And one of the things I think is very evident about Jason Kidd this time around is how much, number one, he trusts the players. And number 2, about how much of it is about the relationships with the players.
And that's the thing. He's a player's coach through and through, but being around, you get your chance to be a head coach and, dumpster fires, like you said, they were both of them. But you go to the Lakers and you spend time coaching LeBron or however you want to say it. Like you spend time in an organization that has a guy like that who, obviously is, the next level of Luka, that's what we all hope. He's kind of like that caliber, but he's just a basketball savant. And you're around Phil Handy, who's the best player development guy in the NBA. Debatably in the NBA, and you're around this greatness, and it kind of lets you sit back and absorb and say, oh, wow, maybe I should have done something like that in Milwaukee, or maybe I should have done something like that in Brooklyn. It's just about growing. He was a young head coach. He's a first-time head coach and kind of got thrown into a weird situation in Brooklyn to begin with. And then, Milwaukee, whatever happened with Milwaukee happened. But the other thing, and I think this is really underrated, kind of talking about the Mavs culture and some of the other moves, but you bring in Igor, who's obviously a Slovenian name and a great coach. And
one of their assistant coaches.
An experienced head coach as an assistant coach. And then you bring in a guy like Sweeney, who is, one of these hardworking, fiery, up-and-coming defensive-minded coaches who his name's thrown into head coaching jobs right now. And he's probably, hopefully he stays for a couple more years, but his name is on that ballot. I think he's definitely under 40. I don't know how old he is, but you bring those guys in and you already have, like I said, the Sham Gods and those guys, and Peter Patton, who's their shooting coach. You have those guys around, and you're destined for greatness.
Yeah, and I heard him say here recently, just talking on Dallas radio about what was different and how Jason Kidd was micromanaging everything that happened in Brooklyn, everything that happened in Milwaukee. And despite Jason Kidd's basketball knowledge, there's no doubting that he's one of the smartest coaches, players to come around in the last 50 years of the NBA. Like, you can't do everything. You can't be the skills coach. You can't be the player development coach. You can't be the shooting coach. And that all backfired on him. And they said one of the things that's really stood out to his time here in Dallas, even in less than a year, is that he has empowered those coaches. So not only is it trusting the players, but also trusting the people around him. And I mean, the results are better than basically anybody outside of that Dallas locker room would have thought. So really cool insight. Let's jump in just real quick. We're sitting here. It's mid-May, and we're about to start the Western and Eastern Conference Finals. Just from somebody who's been in the NBA and a couple of organizations, what are you looking for in these two series? I'm not going to put it on you right now, Mitch, to declare a winner, or you can give me your picks for squaring off in the finals. But just tell us what you're looking for here over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think that this final group of 4 teams is probably the best thing that could have happened for the NBA. And there's so many storylines, and any storyline makes this a great finals. You get the kind of unexpected Mavs team with debatably the best player left in the playoffs, which I think he clearly is, but versus this veteran Warriors team, do they have one more chance? And they have Steph Curry, and these guys are back from injury. And you go to the other side, kind of the same thing. Okay, Jason Tatum, is this your time? Like, you brought him to the Eastern Conference Finals. Step up. Can you bring him to the finals? Versus this veteran Heat team. Obviously they speak for themselves with all their vets and, the Heat culture that I mentioned. But I think it's Mavs in 6. I think it's Heat in 6, and I think we have another Mavs Heat rematch, the three-peat.
I've already been feeling that as well.
Yeah, and it's so, it's obviously nerve-wracking, but at the same time, what more could you want as an NBA fan? I mean, not even just talking selfishly as a Dallas fan. Obviously you might want Steph Curry and the Warriors to get one more shot, but the history of 2 championships in the last 16 years being Heat Mavs, and you get the third time and with a whole new roster on both sides, it could be really exciting. So I think that's the biggest thing. It's just the storyline around the NBA, the popularity, Luka stepping up, Jason Tatum stepping up, and these 2 vet teams. It's exciting.
Yeah, it's so cool. I've already been feeling like the Mavs Heat finals is coming yet again. I've been feeling that for a long time. It's so interesting because, like, I look at, NBA is a really great, I guess, like, petri dish for a lot of the intangible things we talk about, because it's so blatant. And there's a lot of things that happen in terms of making decisions based on talent and not really valuing the other pieces. It's really cool that these teams kind of value that. But I looked specifically at Jimmy Butler being paired with the 76ers. Him and Joel Embiid and that team, as they were constructed, is a extremely formidable team. But the organization picks Ben Simmons. Why? Well, he's the 6'10" point guard, and he can do all these things. He's amazing. His skill is amazing. Yeah, his skill is amazing. Nobody is doubting the skill. We're doubting, like, what he's like in crunch time. This is another interesting piece where it's like, all these people. I heard Steve Kerr. He's like, oh yeah, I'm looking at the Mavs and they look great. They look like the 2018 Houston Rockets. And yeah, Luka's James Harden. If you look at Luka Doncic and you think Luka is James Harden, like, I'm sorry, Steve Kerr is a much greater basketball mind than me, but you're crazy. Like, the Mavs are definitely going to win this in 6, if not 5, because if you go into this series and you don't treat Luka Doncic like he's Michael Jordan, like, you're insane, because that is who he is. Like, what we are seeing, I think, is the elevation of a transcendent athlete. Like, I've been saying for a long time, like, man, he feels like LeBron. Like, Luka feels like LeBron. He puts up the numbers like him, but LeBron does not have a killer instinct like Luka. Like, we have not seen a player like this. So it's really interesting that he equated him to James Harden. And I think that is like the biggest mistake you can make, because James Harden's not a complete player. He's a great scorer. Luka is a complete player, and he elevates everybody around him. So obviously I'm super fired up about my Mavs and about just kind of like the last 4 teams that we've got. It's also interesting too, if you look at the last 40 years of the NBA and you look at the teams that won championships, if you didn't have Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Michael Jordan, Shaq, Kobe, Steph Curry or LeBron,
Tim Duncan.
and Tim Duncan, you literally have, I think there's like 5 championship teams in the last 40 years that didn't have one of those 7 or 8 greatest players of all time. So it's really interesting how, like, in the previous NBA, you literally have to have one of the all-time greats on your team to win a championship. And I don't want to speak too soon because Steph Curry's still in the playoffs. And, like, even though it's not the same Steph Curry as 6 years ago, this is still probably the most talented team in the playoffs right now. And so it's just very interesting. And I think it's a good thing for the NBA too, to kind of like maybe graduate or grow into this next stage where hopefully we get, some more Giannis, more Luka, more of these young players that I think are going to kind of represent the future of the NBA. So thanks for coming to my TED Talk, but I'll stop here.
Yeah, and kind of just go off that a little bit. You've seen these teams like the Mavs and the Warriors and all these guys. They've drafted well. They've built from within. They've started when these guys were young. And I think a great example is the Timberwolves. I mean, they made a little run at the end of the season, and they're a good. You got all those guys, D'Angelo Russell, and you build that from within, and that's the next NBA. I think the NBA is going to, phase away from, these 3-4, has been superstars just kind of joining up together. I mean, let's be real, I think that some people say, the thing with Russell Westbrook and he's this and that, he's obviously still a great player, but it's just, that's not what's going to win anymore. It's going to be the guys like Grant Williams stepping up. It's going to be the guys like Maxey going in having a game-winning block, and Drew Holiday getting 2 steals or 2 defensive plays at the end of the game. That's what matters. That is what is going to win basketball games going forward.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I love that. I mean, that's one of the things I'm really hoping. And I'm really glad the Mavericks have gotten this far too, because this is exactly what I think I wanted them to have, because I didn't want them to fall into this narrative of like, oh, we have to go get a second superstar. It's like, you are building the team. Like, the team is better. You're even just on talent, one of the 8 top teams in the league. Yeah. And the combination of the players is greater than what the talent of each individual player is. So I'm 100% with you, Mitch, and obviously some really exciting stuff. We could probably go on for another 4 hours, and maybe we'll put that on the B-side podcast here. Yeah. But as we kind of wrap up here, I know you're involved in a couple of cool things, so I just want to give you a chance to kind of share with our audience like some of the things that you're up to right now.
Yeah, and thanks for that. I would say that the best way to just get in touch with me and keep up with what I'm doing is on LinkedIn. Just Mitch Ford on LinkedIn, and you can follow me on Unbothered Basketball on Instagram as well, doing some great basketball training and just trying to get that really ramped up here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Things are kind of in the dark right now. I got some things moving and nothing worthy enough to bring to notice yet, but be prepared. Give me a follow on LinkedIn, especially.
Well, awesome. Well, Mitch, thank you so much for joining me here today on the highest level, and look forward to having you back soon.
All right. Thanks, Evan.